Good afternoon and morning, depending on where you are. It is 3 p.m. in Singapore and Hong Kong, 5 p.m. in Melbourne, and 9 a.m. in Munich. Welcome to this Radio Finance virtual roundtable on how financial institutions are ensuring operational resilience in a hyper-digitized environment. I am Fu Bunping, the managing editor of the Asian Banker. We've gathered a fantastic group of expert practitioners to share their thoughts on this topic. We have C-suite executives, head of technology and operations, chief information and security officers from some of the leading institutions across Asia to debate the key issues impacting digital and customer experience transformation within the industry. Specifically, we want to discuss how and what our guests are doing to create or reinvent product, processes, and workflows that create seamless and frictionless customer experience and at the same time meet compliance and regulatory reporting requirements. Operational resilience converges around these key areas of how well we are meeting customer needs, whether they are external consumers or internal employees, operational risk management, and regulatory compliance enabled by data, technology, and systems. We want to make this discussion as practical as possible and focus on your different perspective, what you are doing and the challenges that you face and how you overcome them. For our audience who are joining us via Zoom or live stream on Facebook, we want you to be part of the conversation. So do send us your questions by the chat function on Zoom or comment in Facebook. We hope that this discussion will offer some clear insights on the digital transformation initiatives that our guests are implementing, how they are adopting technologies such as APIs, open banking, and cloud to enable new business models and enhance customers and employee experience, how they are automating and digitizing end-to-end workflows and processes for greater efficiency, control, and resilience, how they are ensuring the security, stability, and robustness of IT processes and services as part of integrated risk management. It is great that we have some of the most diverse, competitive, developed, as well as well-supported banking markets in terms of financial infrastructure represented today. Now, let me introduce our guests. First, we have Voranuch Dejakaisaya, Chief Information and Operation Officer of Siam Commercial Banks in Thailand. Yvonne Cheong, Head of Digital Risk, Digital Business at OCBC in Singapore. Colin Dinn, Segment Head of Enterprise Technology and Operations at Security Bank in the Philippines. David Chan, Chief Information Security Officer, Hang Seng Bank in Hong Kong. And his counterpart, Dick Ho, Deputy General Manager in charge of Customer Management and Bank of China in Hong Kong as well. Kitti Kosavisutte, Chief Information Security Officer, Bangkok Bank in Thailand. Mr. Lito Villanueva, Chief Innovation and Inclusion Officer, RCBC in the Philippines. Matthew Talbot, Head of Financial Services in Asia Pacific and Japan at financial technology company ServiceNow. Tobias Gondrom, Group Chief Information Security Officer at UOB Singapore, although Tobias is calling us from Munich today. He's there to do some business. And lastly, Graeme, Milroy, Risk Advisory Partner from Deloitte in Hong Kong. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I look forward to a lively and very exciting discussion with you. The industry has seen an acceleration in digitization since the outbreak of COVID-19, as consumers have shifted to using digital channels and online tools in many aspects of their daily lives, from work, business, shopping, attending classes, dining, to even entertainment. As a result, they have also received and are starting to expect more differentiated experience from what they were used to. Faster, completely digital mode of delivery and real-time transactions. Amid this transition, financial institutions are focused on increasing operational excellence and resilience, turning to end-to-end automation of workflows to integrate risk management and control into digitized processes that deliver better customer experience. Changing operating environment and customer behavior have also caused regulators to heighten and revise their IT risk management and outsourcing guidelines, especially around third-party providers, insofar as vulnerabilities and gaps in the system that may lead to increased fraud, as well as cyber-related risk and threats, especially with the prevalent shift to digital and remote work. There are many factors driving the transformation that is taking place that we see today. Perhaps one of the biggest enablers are regulation and regulators that are making financial services perhaps one of the most open and connected industry today. It has increased connectivity or connectedness between consumers and the service provider that they work with or they interact with through ecosystem and supply chains. And it has allowed new business models to evolve because customers and businesses are no longer defined or confined by the segments and silos that we put them into, or by the relationship that we define them, such as business to consumers or consumers to consumers, downstream or upstream. But they can now be business to business to consumers as part of an interconnected supply chain. And the silos that are being broken because we can no longer define the customers according to segments or silos that we have predetermined. They are now connected in many ways that we can no longer control. And how banks are set up need to reflect that. And that is quite fundamental because the ability to receive and make payments with money is fundamental to any human economic activity. So regulators are pushing that as part of a financial innovation and inclusion agenda. And the power of connectivity and data has democratized finance. So now we are not thinking of finance to the underbanked or unbanked as just microfinance or micro lending, but also micro investment or micro wealth management with micro investment portfolio, and micro insurance are becoming available too. Around the region, we see in Hong Kong, virtual banks operating since March last year. In the Philippines, standalone digital banks are starting to operate. And we see other digital-only banks starting to operate around the region very soon as well, as regulators start to allow them license to operate. And we see local banks beefing up their digital capabilities, their digital banking apps to catch up. Digital-only banks will operate in these other countries in the near future. And the other big role that regulators have played are to enable financial infrastructure across the region. We find real-time retail payment system everywhere. FPS in Hong Kong, PromptPay in Thailand, InstaPay in the Philippines, and PayNow in Singapore, and national ID system employing some of the latest technology, even DLT technology such as NDID in Thailand, SingPass, as well as open banking or financial data exchange platform such as SG Findex in Singapore, and digital trade platforms, for example, eTrade Connect in Hong Kong. So there are so many of these ingredients for banks to use to innovate and compete. And one of the biggest challenges is to update one's siloed and manual processes and workflows into digital ones that can interface and interact with new partners and collaborators that we work with today. So let us discuss our first topic, the digital transformation initiative and technologies that are enabling you to shift to new business models and enhance customer and employee experience. What are the product and processes that you are prioritizing with the greatest impact on customer and employee engagement? I want to focus this question on the technology and operations executive practitioners here first. The most important initiative you are working on to improve and transform customer experience and to scale your operations. Let's start with a conventional bank, by definition. okay, but no less a challenger or disruptor, security bank, and Colin Dinn, who's got experience in Thailand, leading one of its leading banks there, and then now here at Security Bank. Colin, tell us in terms of some of the initiatives that you're working on. There are interesting things that you're working on in Security Bank. For example, all access account that combine different products that give customers a range of products and services at the same time.
Okay, Ping, thank you for inviting me. I think the thing that we're looking at and we're very excited about is when the pandemic happened, we actually took a step back and decided what did we want to do and what did we want to do differently. We wanted to be customer-centric, and I mean truly customer-centric. So we actually stepped back and asked ourselves a very serious question. Why and how do our customers want to interact? Not how we want to interact with them, but why and how they want to interact. So we undertook a fairly big survey and assessment, and basically we came back with two real big findings. One is we're going to restructure our distribution strategy, and I'll come back to that shortly. And then the second was we're going to create something which we've labeled a contact framework, which is very much driven by what the customer wants. One of the things that I think is fundamental to both of these components is that neither of them are static anymore. The way in which our customers are going to interact, our distribution strategy has got to be very dynamic, and it's also got to be very changeable. So you can't be locked into old processes or old technologies. You've got to be doing something different. So it was to build, if you will, a common sales and service. And what do I mean by a common sales and service? It's something that we can expose through a load desk in a branch, a contact center, through a chatbot, through a mobile, and basically the same sales and service functionality, the same sales and service experience. And it's not just about technology. It's about the journey. We're plotting and designing all these around the customer journey. It's making sure that all this conversation is independent of our legacy. So nothing in our legacy influences us. Mm-hmm. It's about the same business processes, the same audit processes, the same control processes. It's about the structure of providing knowledge to our banking staff and our customer. So content management is a big driver in this new platform capability. Yes, there is technology, microservices, APIs, cloud native, all of those things are going to be in place as well. But the thing is, it's more about building value management so that we can change the processes, the channels, the way we interact based on the value to our customer and the value to the bank. Now, has this been a really easy journey? Technologically, I would say it's a challenge, but that's the minor of the challenge. Changing the mindset of a bank, because in this model, you don't limit people by their respective channels. We organize by channels. We organize by branch, contact center, digital. Now we're organizing by what our customers want, what our customer segments are, what our specific skill sets are. And it doesn't matter where you sit in. You could be then involved in a conversation face-to-face, or a conversation on a live chat, or a conversation on a telephone. So we're really changing the dynamic, and that is really fundamental. And that's the harder part of it, is this whole cultural change about how we're going to do it. The other thing that we're targeting within this model is we're going to really focus on resolution at single point of contact. It's going to the right person when you're doing it. So building that complexity of skills and understanding, routing through the organization has been a fundamental part of what we've built. So it's really building something which is customer centric. We have not looked at product. We have not looked at which products we want to sell. We have not looked at which products we should be doing this with. We have actually taken it all from, this is why a customer wants to call us or talk to us, and this is when they want to do it, and this is how. So we've got to be able to make it very much more flexible. The other thing is we've got to be able to adjust this dynamically year on year, or even quarter by quarter, so that we will distribute the processes and the structure of how we interact differently across the branches, the contact center, and the digital as we go along and as our customers change. So that's the major initiative that we're driving. I'm very excited about it. I'm very pleased. It's a big challenge, and it fundamentally changed the way the bank are looking at the customer.
Yes, that sounds very exciting, integrating around the customers, putting their experience and the journey right at the center of what you do, but that comes with a lot of complexity as well as you update your processes and your workflow. We'll get into that in the later part, but for right now, I'd like to hear from Kun Voranuch at Siam Commercial Bank as well. We were discussing this earlier, and the pandemic has brought some challenges as well in terms of how you respond to new initiatives to help consumers, businesses through this part. How do you have to respond to all the demands in helping these customers through the pandemic?
Okay, thanks for inviting me too, and then I can see all of my old friends too. Then Colin here. In fact, I took the role like succeed from him at the Siam Commercial Bank.
Right.
It's just like a bit on the technical part that I think majority like Colin already covers in terms of technical.
We seem to have a bit of a connection problem with Kun Voranuch. Okay, but perhaps as we are restoring our connection back to Kun Voranuch, I would like to ask the question to Mr. Dick Ho from Bank of China, Hong Kong. How are you? What are some of the initiative that you have identified as you move towards as we're all discussing about putting customer at the center?
Yeah, I think through the pandemic, basically, people are really quite locked down, and I think the physical footprint basically is become a not as effective as before. And I think the customer, we really look into what the customer wants. They want, different channel, digital channel. I think this is all well said in many different cases. So to us, as a bank, so I think mobile first is our core strategies. So we identify mobile banking basically is the way to go. Without pandemic, basically is the future. So what we make the mobile more than a transaction platform, because in the past mobile basically is a transaction platform, is quite cold, not warm, and quite a one-way kind of communication with the customers. So we are really thinking from the customer point of view, how we can make the mobile more lively and more relevant to them. So basically we change the whole setup of the mobile banking. Start with a kind of a good image like coffee, and make them feel like when they open our mobile banking, it's not quite cold, it's more warm. I think there's a first of all we want to really to change that emotion. And second of all, we want to introduce new things and new stuff from the technology. So earlier in this year, we launched our live channel in our mobile banking platform. And why we build this live channel? Because you can Facebook Live, you can have all sort of live channel in the social media platform. But what we hear from customer, particularly when they are thinking about like wealth management kind of issues, some of those are quite skeptical about like streaming for 30 minutes with their phone in a social media platform. Some of our customers more conservative. That's why I hear them. So we built our own live channel within our mobile banking, which will give them a more secure place, to really enjoy different programs. So we roll out like 40 programs already this year, and the program will be, is about like wealth management, how they manage their wealth, some of the tips about how they construct, their portfolio in 10 minutes, and also like property market in Great Bay in China, and also like different markets, different investment market, ethics and whatsoever. So I think it's turned out to be quite responsive by our customer, and I think that and then I think I pretty much agree with Colin that this is about the customer. This is about what they want, and when we do this, we want to our core objective is to have a good and warm, engaging relationship with the customer. We are not thinking about the business, but it turned out to be the business will come when you achieve that, because when some of the customer after watching our investment kind of house view, basically they call up our relationship manager, and then we have some quite a jumbo deal afterwards. And then I think that the technology piece is not a very high-tech technologies, but when combining with our existing processes, combining with our relationship manager, and I think that is something that we create value to the customer, that they enjoy watching our program and then talk to their RM, and then finally they can make advice, investment transaction. I think that is about like using technologies to help us to engage the customer. Yeah, that's about it.
It's an interesting area as well for wealth management. Traditionally, wealth management is kind of done through wealth managers, relationship managers who meet the customers and talk to them and understand what they need. And right now we're moving that to a digital channel that requires a different way for the customers to interact, and also interact in a way that they may not be comfortable with in terms of sharing their financial data through the web and so on and so forth. We'll get into that more, but kind of related to the wealth area, I want to get Yvonne's perspective on this topic on leveraging AI ecosystem, open banking. In Singapore, there is a financial data sharing platform. It's a utility that all banks use, SG Findex. How is OCBC leveraging it to provide a differentiated customer experience? It's called OneView, right? OCBC. Tell us more.
Yeah. Okay. Hi everyone. Thanks again, Woon Pin, for having me. Right, it's really a great pleasure to be with the very distinguished panelists here and all the audience here to really talk about what's happening in all the digital world. And like what you have mentioned, right, we are really in a very increasingly volatile and digitized environment. But within itself, we also present many unique opportunities, right? As we have seen, right? And like what you mentioned, in Singapore context, the SG Index, it's really changing the way how people are managing their finance, right? So that's the Singapore's financial data exchange, right? And it is the open banking platform that aggregates customer data across all the FIs. So when we took a hard look at what are the new opportunities out there, especially in times like this, right? That's where we really look at, from a customer point of view, how can we help him to manage his financials much better? We revamp, our entire thinking in terms of products, from the products to the technology, to the processes, and all the way even to the training of our people in looking at the new technology that is available. And with the integration to SG Index, we launched what we call the OCBC Financial OneView, which is essentially a very unique one-stop dashboard, digital dashboard for customers to be able to see and view all the consolidated cash holdings as well as investment across board, right? And with that, we went deeper, right? We look at it, it's like, hey, we can do more. We extended the capability where we introduced an all-inclusive financial planning tool, right, through the OCBC Live Goals, using APIs, data analytics, and as well as AI, right? Basically, with the tool, it enables our customers to think about what will be the financial goals, to do simulations, to receive personalized recommendations, as well as nudges that are powered by AI behind, to prompt them to think, how can they invest better? How can they safeguard their assets, right? And we even, had the chance, to launch the first integrated income tax management, where they could, through the connection using the API from IRAS, right, which is a tax authority in Singapore, customers could even bring in the income tax, right, and property tax management. So it's like, it's going beyond what a traditional bank used to be able to offer.
It's something very new. How are customers kind of adapting to it? How is adoption? Aggregating all their financial data, is this something that they're comfortable with? What kind of improvement do you need to do to the existing process to create better comfort for customer to use it?
Yeah, you're right, Woon Pin, absolutely, because here's something very new. In the beginning, people are a bit skeptical, like they're concerned about data security, and the privacy, especially, when we're talking about aggregating all the other banks, within one portal, in this case. So we did a lot of labs. We did a lot of customer interviews where we did mock-ups, and we realized that if we empower the customers and we give back the assurance and the control back to them, they would really, really, lap it up, right? So we've seen in terms of the take-up, it's like the usage is more than double in 6 months. And the live goal, which is the financial planning tool, it took us, by surprise too, that, we saw a 4 times increase. And even more interesting is that the profile of the users were getting much younger, from a typical 50s, we are seeing the 30s, these are a huge group of customers, which is a very good sign, because financial planning, it's not something that people think about it, right? But with the tool and with the climate, with the pandemic climate, people have more time at home. They could start to think, and that's where the tool helps them, in this journey. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Yvonne, for that insight. And then obviously something very kind of emerging and exciting, and to get adoption, probably you need to work with partners as well, right? Get the whole ecosystem involved. Anything to do with financial planning and beyond. Great. We'll get deeper into the discussion. For now, Kun Voranuch is back on. He was just sharing with us some of the responses that she had to make from the technology and operations side, as during COVID itself. Kun Voranuch.
Let me continue. I just mentioned about the Siam Commercial Bank has entered into the digital transformation since for the past 3 years. So in terms of prepare on the customer online, they have done significantly on the platform itself with the digital transformation. One thing I would like to highlight, apart from the retail and the retail segment on the branch channel, this is
you have your pet. Okay. Not to worry. Yes. Yeah.
Sorry. You should let me have it. Anyway.
I hope it,
one thing I think this is an example of the work from home that somehow you got interrupted. Okay. I think one thing about the concept of the work anywhere, before in the beginning talk about the work from home, right? So now I think because of the COVID, work anywhere. So we're looking at the customer also. For Thailand itself, you're looking about the customer relief program. The government has subsidized a lot. So turned to be something of the online mobile banking growing up significantly. One thing we need to manage about the customer expectation. We have always found the incident, especially the month end or the mid of the month on the lotto days, that the transaction growing significantly. So that's why in terms of the stability of the infrastructure of the bank, of the whole bank. So somehow the customer debit customer bank account but cannot trade it. So this is one thing that we look on the customer enhancement. How normally customer has to call us in terms of asking where our money go. So this is something in fact, it may not fully develop, but we're looking about how we can make the customer more happy. We can kind of commit it in terms of one transaction like this, we're going to return you the money within this minute or the, how is it? Compare with the regulators that require 24 hours, right? But however, this is something that is changed because of the COVID. Traditional, you have to meet the customer face to face, go to the branch, or even for the SME, you also need to go to see the customer, training them. So this is something we also develop for the SME or the corporate customer, develop more about the product that you can apply. But normally, if you would like to apply the cash management, you need to fill up a lot of form. So with this, you go to the platform, you download the application, and then we can have the kind of the video trainings, right? And so this is kind of the change a lot in terms of the cost-wise. It's also reduced, but again, I think that we're still on the pilot. Have to keep watching the customer satisfaction. One thing I think this is really something new, especially in the banking, that we enter to the food delivery, right? The Siam Commercial Bank has this last year because of the COVID. we found like the CEO found like when the customer ordered the food, the merchant being charged. So he think like, why not? So we developed the platform called Robinhood, and then go to the delivery. In fact, we don't have the profit at all because of we say like we don't charge the merchants, right? So we developed the Robinhood platform for food delivery and then go to the riders. I think like last month, we also offer in terms of like delivery food, we're gonna pay because of we're looking about how our customer already suffer for the COVID-19. So I think this is something new, like we can see about the merchant increase quite significantly. Even we don't feel like we're gonna have the earned income, but again, our customer base, our customer satisfaction during like the critical time. I think this is kind of make our bank last long and then in the heart of the customer. So I just that is
your ability to deal with crisis and to support customers during such a trying time is really a litmus test of the resilience. And we see that you're doing a lot in terms of helping customers during the relief, kind of monitor their transactions, how you can ease onboarding for your SMEs and even support food delivery, right? So many things happening that requires operation processes to be really fine-tuned to support that. We'll get into that more in the next part of the discussion. Next, I'd like to hear from Mr. Lito Villanueva in the Philippines. You are the Chief Innovation and Inclusion Officer. Many things that the RCBC is working on. One of it is the digital app, but also in terms of financial inclusion, there are also programs like Synergy and Finance, an open finance network to support rural banking community. Tell us a bit about some of the priorities that you're working on in terms of meeting those customer needs and customer priorities.
Thank you so much, Bunting, for having me here, and again, privileged to be part of this session. To answer your question, at RCBC, we believe that meeting the needs of the underbanked and underserved is all about breaking the barriers. Well, in the Philippines, you all know that there are practically, I would say, 3 barriers that would include, of course, number 1, our geography, being archipelago with many geographically isolated and disadvantaged areas. Of course, we have various coastal towns and rugged terrain. Number 2 would be problems on internet connectivity, which is still at 40% across the country. And good thing that the government, through our regulator, the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, came up with an executive order signed by the Philippine president to push for more what we call the satellite broadband across the rural towns. No? And the third would be the cost of digital banking in terms of time, effort, energy, and of course, the money one has to spend for transactions. But then as digital became the lifeline for many of us during the pandemic, a lifeline everyone must have access to, we realized we did not have to choose which one to prioritize. So in the Philippines, the digital acceleration across industry drives financial inclusion. And, of course, I think all of us here in this forum would be aiming for financial inclusion, especially for developing markets like the Philippines. On the other hand, it fuels the digital acceleration efforts in the country. And the local central bank, as I've said, the BSP agreed with this, and in fact, they came up with a very bold vision, and they called it the Digital Payments Transformation Roadmap, targeting about 50% of the financial transactions to migrate to digital, together with the goal of getting about 70% of the adult Filipinos to be onboarded into the formal financial system by end of 2023. And in fact, that is the time by which the term of our incumbent Governor Ben Diokno will be. So we decided to streamline our digital banking platforms, in line with the BSP's twin goals of digital acceleration and financial inclusion. So as I've said, since digital is the lifeline, we knew that exceeding the expectations of our customers by way of providing them with a delightful customer experience is really the primordial vision or objectives of all the players in the industry. So in the case of RCBC, we believe in what we call contextual banking. No? We had to zero in on our customers, who they are, what they do, and what their banking needs are, and how we can fulfill those needs. And in fact, aside from that, we also supported ongoing measures to ramp up digital banking security, including the implementation of a national ID system. So our government came up with a very bold vision again, no, of trying to register at least 70% of the adult population in the Philippines by end of 2021. So that's why I think we're quite lucky in the Philippines that we have a very progressive government through a very dynamic regulator in the person of the governor of the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas. So I think these are some of the good news happening in the Philippines now amidst the pandemic. And as I've said, if there is something positive that COVID-19 brought about, I think it's the further acceleration of digital transformation in the Philippines. Thank you.
And we know the BSP is very enlightened in terms of its view of the use of technology, and also the view of how the formal banking industry needs to work with technology partners, including big techs, and they are very open to them playing a more active role in bringing finance to the masses, to meeting your financial inclusion goals. So, and it set a huge target by 2023, 70% to be included. That you have your work cut out for you. There's a lot to be done. Next, we'd like to hear from Matthew from ServiceNow, who works with financial institutions across the region on their processes and workflows, focusing on balancing both compliance requirements, security requirements, as well as delivering superior customer experience. Matthew, tell us what are some of the things that you are observing across the industry among the clients that you work with?
Yeah, thanks, Boon Ping, and thank you for having us. Obviously, post-COVID and during COVID, we've seen obviously financial institutions around the world accelerate their digital transformation. And for those who are not aware about ServiceNow, we work with over 1,000 financial institutions across the world and make cross-functional processes more effective by digitalizing workflow. And obviously, once you've digitalized the workflow, there's an opportunity to insert controls and risk tolerance into those workflows, which starts to obviously protect you in all the areas that we know are key focuses for the banks and insurance companies and wealth management companies around the world. If you look at some of the topics we've talked about, and obviously before you mentioned AI as well, obviously AI is a big foundation about how we digitalize workflows. And, we've made, 4 AI acquisitions over the last couple of years, which have integrated obviously into those workflows, and including things like RPA as well. And some of those have been companies like Element AI, which uses obviously AI to accelerate onboarding of customers. They've done that with someone like HSBC on cards, or in Talbot on RPA, which once again uses RPA to accelerate things like credit and AML and so forth. So there's a great opportunity to accelerate obviously that middle office in general, and we've seen use cases around improving the customer experience, which we've talked about, KYC, fraud activities, analyzing documents. We mentioned chatbots before, natural language processing, biometrics, etc. So there's a great opportunity obviously now, whether it's across IT, whether it's across the employee experience or the customer experience, to actually digitalize across the board and take the opportunity once it's digitalized to obviously insert risk controls into that.
Okay, great. So a great opportunity as the pace of digitization picks up for banks as they digitize their products, their customer experience, is to go at the number of it, the workflow, and how do you, as you update those built into them the necessary compliance and risk controls. At this point, I'd like to bring in all our information security officers in terms of how the challenges that you face with digitization, with more transaction going digital. How are you balancing security and compliance requirements? Maybe to start with, David, Hang Seng Bank.
Hey, thanks one thing. Hey, hi everyone. It's an honor to be here. Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I mean, all my life I've been studying, from an engineering space. I'll specialize in program software development and stuff. But as I move higher up the ladder in terms of my career, constantly find myself trying to balance things, right? And I'm really up to a point that we all know all decision makes that we make are could neither be right or wrong, right? But it's how good it is, and it's really an art. So sometimes see the art of management is what it really means. Is balancing the risk and compliance and enabling the business. So I think the key answer to this, from my years of experience in management, is really the people, right? And the culture, and then the technology that you adopt in terms of how you automate the compliance process. Because at the end, right, if something needs to be launched into the market and to enable the customer's usage, it needs to go through a rigorous assurance process. Are we really identifying the correct risk? Are we really articulating it correctly to the business? And do we understand the risk that we're accepting, the residual risk that we're accepting? So it's really all about people and how we support these people and the training that we provide them, and also the culture of the whole bank, right? If everyone is willing to support and understand in terms of being more risk adverse, or are they do they really understand the risk appetite, balancing the controls with respect to what the risk that we want to take. So what I can answer is really about the people, and ultimately the culture and how we influence the organization as a whole. And also we leverage automation, right? And also the data that we obtain from our automation tools in order to strike a very fine balance between what is really required and what is optional, or what's
Okay. And how does automation, right, and digitization of what used to be manual processes, do they overall reduces the risk somewhat, because you're able then to better control those processes because they're automated, they're digitalized? It's much easier than traditional manual processes. And with that, and also coupled with COVID, has that accelerated this whole program towards digitization of workflows and also building in the necessary controls and so on and so forth? What have you observed at Hang Seng Bank?
Sure, that's a good question as well, because with the automation that we have, we are not automating everything, obviously, right? Because it's very dangerous, right? And there are always people. We are a very big organization, and there will always be people trying to bypass some of the controls, right? And so having said that, we need a very strong governance framework on this, right? And obviously, when we talk about automation, we need to understand the level of automation that we want to achieve. And also, it's not really about if we really want to, would like to automate, but actually we do not really have a choice in times like these when we need to reduce our operational cost, increase our efficiency. And to be honest, with automation and the data and the dashboard that it generates, it really have no emotions, right? Because people are very emotional people, and if you say that, oh, you got a risk, and you can't proceed because of this reason, then people start to get emotional, right? But if with automation and
becomes
right dashboard, there's no emotion involved, right? Because that's what the computer is telling you and what the data is telling you. So we were trying to automate most of the stuff, but to be honest, we are not 100% there yet, and we still have a way to go, and how we develop and brush our data and MI. Yeah.
Okay, it's an ongoing process. Okay, let's hear from Kitti from Bangkok Bank as well. How do you look at delivering customer experience and having that's the dichotomy, right? Higher compliance and risk control. Does it get in the way of better customer experience?
Yeah, hi. Thank you for inviting me here. When we talk about the digitalization or digital transformations, what has been actually changed? What we can see is, for sure, the business landscape changed, as the previous panelists mentioned about a lot of innovation, a lot of new technology adoptions to the service. The service pattern or type of service has been changed rapidly, especially during the COVID time. People try to adopt a lot of technology in order to reach out or improve the engagement, customer engagement. In terms of the security or risk perspective, the risk landscape also changed a lot. What I see is during the COVID especially, there's a lot of phishing, there's a lot of techniques, malware, and relate to and linkage to the COVID situations. That is the human factors that they try to penetrate to. The most important thing here is because of technology adoption change very fast. Customer may not really understand what it is, what the technology, what the service has been adopted, and what is a loophole, especially the data that they use in order to get into the service and enjoy the service without knowing what is the risk. This is the key that I see that we have a lot. We are facing a lot of risk here. So when we talk about the balancing between compliance and risk, I mentioned about the risk. So compliance normally come from regulators or law. That sometimes somehow it kind of slow because they need to I don't know, but it come later. But the risk and technology adoption is go very fast. So we see the gap between compliance, both legal or regulatory compliance, and the risk that come from technology adoptions. So if we talk about balancing, the both of the compliance and risk itself is not balanced by itself, because risk go first, compliance come later. It kind of if we talk about this one, I would say that what we need to balance is not really the compliance and risk, it's really the expectations balancing between service providers and customer. Because we go fast in order to engage, improve the engagement, adopt the technologies. But on the other hand, we need to improve on the customer side as well for their expectations. That is what I see is very challenge for banking and also security job. Yes.
Right. So that is a very good point as well, to bring the customer kind of expectation into what you do as well. It's not just what the banks is comfortable with and what the regulator is comfortable with, but also the customers. And we know from research, right, especially in Asia, consumers are more likely to take greater risk if there is greater perceived benefit, right? They are more willing to share data with third parties if they perceive that the benefit that they get from it, whether it is through a better experience, a shorter waiting time, or highest interest rate or whatever. They are more willing to do that trade-off. So I know how do we address that? Does technology play a part to help manage that or lessen that on the consumer side, or to make it more kind of more obvious? We know one thing for sure is that during pandemic, all the scams have gone up because consumers are not as wary as they should be, right? Okay, so next we would like to get also a perspective from Tobias, who's in Munich. Perspective from UOB in terms of this challenge of managing customer expectations as well in the role that you play and ensuring security. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Yes, and I'm just temporarily in Munich. I'm based in Singapore, so don't get me wrong. Singapore is my home. Actually, I think how we balance security with this new customer journey, maybe a few observation tying it back to what the CIOs and others said before on this call. Actually, the journey that we are on, we were on that journey already for quite a number of years. The only thing is it hastened significantly due to COVID. And there were two aspects to this. One was automation, which was mentioned before. In terms of risk to automation, is quite simple. You can enhance things, as you pointed out, Boon Ping, by introducing automated controls. But also, unfortunately, if you automate, that means you can scale. That means you can go big. The problem is if you go big wrong, then it's going to get really, really ugly. So that means automation also requires a more stringent control, because obviously then you also fail at scale, which is not a good thing to do. So that's one, but that's pretty much internal to the bank. So this is something that I think we all can manage quite well. Second part is the customer journey. I think that was mentioned before also, where we had actually in the past the journey from the evolution from branch, PC, mobile. And actually, I think what we've seen during the COVID pandemic is that people are jumping. They are actually jumping directly from branch to mobile, and in fact to mobile only. They may not even have a PC anymore. So that creates also a different risk profile. So now to coming to the balance of it. Actually, I don't think there is much of a balance. As my colleagues mentioned before, like regulation is normally coming a little bit slower, but that's fine because we are managing risk first. And if we do it well, then actually compliance comes automatically. So because we understand what the risks are, and if you look at the latest TRM guidelines in Singapore or in other countries, actually in many cases it's about managing the risk well. So if you do that well, then actually you have very little problems. However, this new customer journey and this environment, and now tying it back to the topic, for example, about the ecosystem that Yvonne mentioned before. In ecosystems, the problem is we are dependent on others. And in the past, we could audit our suppliers. In an ecosystem, this doesn't work like this. In an ecosystem, you have a number of people who are interdependent with each other. And there's not one person who holds the pen on everybody. Therefore, we are all in a web of dependency and trust. And to ensure that web of dependency and trust, actually that requires the support of a regulator, as well as new ways of managing risk. How we do this in our case is that we build in security right from the beginning, meaning we enable new customer journeys by advising right from the start on the design of that customer journey. And that ties it back to the point from David about it's about people. Yes, it's exactly about how we design things together and share that knowledge.
Okay. That is a great insight, Tobias, and we'll get deeper into that in the next section. I'd like to get Graeme in the discussion as well. Graeme is the risk advisory partner at Deloitte in Hong Kong. What are you seeing in terms of banks having to grapple with this, new customer journey, as well as the need for compliance and greater security. Graeme.
Yeah, thanks, Bin Ping. It's really good. It's really great to be here and to hear from such distinguished guests and just hear about some of these, really amazing innovations that all these businesses across Asia are implementing. So I mean, interesting. I think some of my comments will probably just reinforce some of what we've heard. So my days, historically, when I can meet people in person, but even now over video, they're spent particularly working with risk and compliance and security teams at client organizations, basically control teams, and these teams are historically run quite manually. So a lot of emails, a lot of manual reviewing of new regulations, sending those regulations out to folk in the business, out in business units across the region, more email, and lots of Excel, right? So, what I've seen, and the previous panelists are kind of commenting on this, the technology acceleration that's been pushed by the circumstances around the pandemic, it seems to have led to renewed appetite for automation, for simplicity, for workflow, and people working from home, and I think the comment made earlier about being able to work anywhere. So this, our organizations now need automation and they need simplicity in a way that we maybe as employees felt we needed, but now we really need it. So through that you're getting the rise of these low-code tools. So some of the tools like ServiceNow that was mentioned earlier, for example, and then companies thinking about, do they outsource to third parties to build those tools, and do they build in-house capability? Do they build centers of excellence? So a lot of the questions that clients are asking themselves is, do we want to build this in-house? Will we benefit from having this perhaps coding capability within the organization? I'm thinking here not about technology teams, but about, for example, risk teams, audit teams. It helps with employee retention as well. So it makes people's careers more interesting. Folk that are maybe doing, or you're hiring different people into the team, or people are learning a new skill set. So that's really what I'm seeing. And it's been a very interesting time through the pandemic. It's been, I guess, one of the silver linings to it.
Okay. Indeed, it's an interesting time. The drive towards digitization, adoption of technology that the pandemic has kind of catalyzed. To Tobias' point that we mentioned earlier, and also Kitti and David was talking about the culture for managing the risk, right, during this pandemic time, as well as new ways of working. We talk about ecosystem where there is a web of dependencies, right, that you can't audit or can't manage because it's external to you. So internally, what you can do is look at the whole customer journey that you have in mind, and how you can put the necessary control in place. I'd like to get inputs from Colin. Back to you, Colin. You're talking about service and distribution model, right? Being very dynamic, being customer-centric. So as you grapple with this issue, as greater adoption of technology and the greater ability to scale, that you don't kind of get into the way of scaling, or to fail at scale, right, at the same time.
What we're doing, I think it's not very dissimilar to everybody else. What we do now is, when we look at those end-to-end, we look at the customer journeys. We don't look at just the interaction. We look at the end-to-end. We look at the whole thing through to fulfillment, through to controls. One of the things, and I think the panel have highlighted, is the controls, how you manage the risk, and all of those other aspects. These are all got to be built into the solutions that we actually put in place. So when we're looking at the solution that I was discussing before, it is about fulfillment. It is about building controls. It is about having all of those things in place. So you build in security through design at the start, and you actually manage that. And that's leveraging the skills of the operations staff, who I have a lot of respect for, because they are the backbone of most of the banks I've ever worked in, and their knowledge is huge. So they're the people who help you shape and actually make sure that they're very, very robust. So that's the way we're tackling it.
Okay, and you, as Graeme mentioning, some of the banks are considering whether you build that capability, that skill in-house, or you're working with third-party solution provider.
I think everybody's got to look at the resourcing model. The most critical issue is skill gap, and so basically you've got to look at a blend of internal and external. You've got to grow your core internally, and you've got to actually leverage external skills where you can. So it's about having that blended model, and it's very, very critical to every organization that I've ever come across nowadays. You can't be self-reliant, you can't build isolation, and you can't build walls around what you do.
Okay, and as I mentioned earlier on, the industry itself is becoming more open in terms of working with partners, and you have to, right? Because there's only so much that you have internal. Kun Voranuch, I'd like to get your insight as well, as you know.
Yeah, I think similar. I think from the SCB itself, we set up the tech company that, in fact, our main objective in terms of the build our in-house expertise. However, also have the partnership with the tech partners that have the high skill. Because as you see about the growing of the digital, in fact, when we're looking about what needs to be done, and looking at when we talk about the operation efficiency, looking about the process that we did in the past, and mostly is either rely on the platform or rely on the process. So, but again, for this one, because of the digital, we need to change more. So apart from the lean process or redesign, I think the platform. So even we did a lot on RPA, on the many kind of the things, even a workflow, it may not be enough. So we need it all integrated of all these things. I think with the legacy, somehow it takes time in terms of to spend time to identify the gap. So likely maybe redevelop with the new architecture. I think that's the way we would like to go. And then we see about a lot of things probably we end up with about the low cost, and then we can choose what we want, and then kind of the future design. And that is maybe better looking for the customer journey for the whole, rather than this way, like Colin mentioned. But I think that is a good time in terms of the looking something new, not just really a transform. So I think about the really place that can be the idea.
Okay. Couldn't Colin mention about the skill, the challenge of the skill gaps, right? And then a lot of the time, a lot of the digital customer journey that you are designing or you have in mind, never done before. So in terms of expertise, in terms of skills to design it and to make sure that it is that the necessary control is put in place. That necessarily needs some input from outside. How do you see that?
Yeah, it's really true because of in terms of the groomer, you need a lot of people. Siam Commercial Bank in a way about make use a lot of the outside as a consultant. But again, at the end, we found that it may not be sustained. I think consultant come and go. So by the time you still need them, but you need to build our resource in the pipeline, and that is a way we need to groom up. Because of it's hard to rely solely dependency with the single vendor or even multiple vendor. You need to build. It will take a while, but I think that is the way to go for sure. I think that's a way. So we're also looking about even now on the IT, you need to do the test. So everyone have to code the program. So that's the thing.
Thank you. Good, very much. Okay, I'd like to get Matthew perspective as well on this whole area of creating that that designing journey and workflows and bringing expertise to make sure that the controls, the compliance requirement are in there, and that again the great ability of technology to automate, to scale that that we don't end up with scaling failure, right?
Yeah, thank you, Boon Ping. Just firstly, obviously, of what Graeme and some of the others said, I mean, what we're starting to see on the resource front is a lot more of the financial institutions are taking, obviously, functionality out of the box as such, minimizing customization so they can upgrade quicker. You know, embracing some of the standards that are out there around Bion and other standards. And we see a lot of our customers building out centers of excellence, as Graeme mentioned. So actually taking platforms like us that can provide that cross-functional, for example, workflow across the organisation, whether it's the IT, the employee, the customer experience, IRM, etc. And then using, obviously, our low-code platform to allow, obviously, developers and citizens developers to actually build on top of that and really, you know, obviously create their own, you know, centre of excellence as such and accelerate innovation going forward. And that's important. I think on the controls and the monitoring, you know, an interesting example, a customer of ours, you know, on the tech controls, you know, we saw them identify 68% of their controls could be automated and then have continuous monitoring around it. And if you look at that and the cost savings in relation to testing and so forth around that, it's significant. And I think we're seeing more and more of that. It obviously started off very much on the IT, but as we've talked about today, obviously we've got the same risks and exposure, you know, in relation to onboarding and offboarding employees as they're out of the office, the same with customers because they're using digital, obviously, tools only, and so forth. So it's becoming critical to embed those controls and those risk tolerance into the workflows. And we're seeing customers around the world do that, whether it's in relation to you know, the lines of business where in the middle office, like loan servicing or payments operations, you know, card onboarding, wealth onboarding, etc. You know, we're really seeing people not only digitalize now, but obviously try and put those controls in to protect that, you know, first line of defence. And obviously by starting to digitalize across the board, you're starting to see a single view of your risk exposure across the board into your, you know, integrated risk management systems. And that's critical. And, you know, one topic that we haven't even talked about, you know, is obviously, you know, the increase around operational resilience and regulation around the world. And if you've automated and started to automate a lot of those risk and controls, it makes it a lot easier to obviously move towards getting to true operational resilience, which is obviously a major theme across the world at the moment.
Okay, great. Thank you, Matthew. If you can get a Dick perspective as well from Bank of China, Hong Kong, in terms of how are you addressing that point in terms of minimizing or mitigating risk and improving control as you automate your customer journey and the work processes behind those?
Yeah, I think first of all, like digital journey is quite different from, you know, the usual like the journey that as a branches, because in the past, you know, the control is more like how to make sure that our staff are, you know, behave, you know, as what they should be, and also, you know, control the whole process is in a robust, you know, kind of thing. But moving to digital, basically, is more of a customer to do their job, you know, within our platform. So I think the control is shifted. It's not just, you know, the operational risk, you know, what can happen to our staff, but basically a more cyber kind of risk that, you know, which we're sure, you know, the customer that you are using that mobile to do the transaction is really the customer, or how we can protect our customer by, you know, being stolen their credential to by, you know, some like criminal, you know, to really to rob their bank digitally. So I think the control is quite a different kind of approach. In how we're going to, you know, solve that. Obviously, we employ like expert, you know, from outside. I think there's no point there. We do all the stuff inside. We need to have a balance about something critical thing we build inside, but we also employ, you know, external help. And I think most importantly is about the process to baking the new service. And then actually whenever doing like digital kind of initiatives, we have quite a stringent like project management that usually as a waterfall, you know, the business will think about the, you know, the business and how to do this, and then we use a requirement at the end before launch, we'll go to the risk department to really get approval. But we really crack them down and bring the risk people up front to, incubator, when we have a workshop, to think about the new ideas, how to make it happen. And basically they sit with us together with a workshop like one day or 2 day. So they can understand what we want to do for the customer, and then they immediately will think about different kind of control that we need to have and what sort of risk we need to take care about. So I think that along the way is a less of a surprise, because at the end when do the approval, usually before there will be a huge conflict there, because some of the risks that we as a business we may be overlooked. They are right. We are overlooked because we didn't have that kind of expertise to do that. So, but now when we are serving that upfront at the very beginning, I think that helps a lot. And I think that the collaboration, I think, is all around the people, how we work together. I think that helps a lot. It's not a technology part to help us, but the way we work together, in a more better way, more risk averse way. I think that will help us, to mitigate the risk.
Okay, kind of embedding that risk awareness, right, and the risk aversion at the front line as one of the three lines of defense, right with the business. Very good. Lito, want to get your perspective as well.
Well, I think for me, for the Philippines, or for RCBC, I think by streamlining our digital banking platforms, we also made much of our processes digital in order to make sure we cater to our customers' needs 24/7. And as any digital bank, promising seamless, frictionless transactions should be doing, I think we have seen the empirical data coming from from the BSP, from our regulators, showing that there has been a dramatic reduction or decrease in so far as cash transactions are concerned. I mean, in terms of the use of ATM or check encashment, but there has been a exponential growth when it comes to the use of electronic fund transfers or the use of e-wallets and digital banking products and services. So a robust, sustainable, and efficient digital ecosystem, as what was earlier mentioned, is only possible when digital platforms are streamlined and are interoperable with one another. And that's why I think we're also thankful for the BSP for really pushing for the national digital payment system, enabling all players in the industry to be interoperable. And now, given the pandemic, the consumers are the ones benefiting from it. And of course, aside from that, we also focus on having a cloud-based core banking solutions and running our apps on the cloud, and enables us to really launch products at the quickest possible time. So given the pandemic, we have actually launched more than 20 features, new features at the height of the pandemic. And I think one of the things that we are also proud about is that we're amongst the first in terms of participating with the BSP insofar as trying out the QR code, for example, or even supporting the open finance framework of the Philippines, encouraging more collaboration among stakeholders in the industry.
More collaboration and greater need to also kind of put in the necessary risk that may come through those collaborations as we discussed earlier. Yvonne, you are now also looking at digital risk as part of the digital risk division. Tell us more about what does that entail.
So that's where, as we see how, the acceleration of all the digital adoption, right? Consumers adoption, as well as internally, the organization is also evolving, bringing along our staff in terms of this digitization journey. So that's why we really see that there is an increasing need, right? To really take a hard look at how we're managing the risk, right? Balancing it with the business, agenda, as well as where the customer centricity comes in. So we start to kind of relook at how we're organizing our people, right? Our processes and the use of the technology, as well as staff training. It's really amazing because it's the entire bank that is going through digitization. So it's not just purely, our IT colleagues, right, that is looking at the use of technology, but the entire bank, right? The entire bank, it's moving forward in this. And we are taking really hard look in terms of our internal processes. Like, can we do this, without compromising the risk, but do it faster, right? Do it smarter, leveraging on some of the AIs and a lot of data analytics, like even in the area of AML, even in the areas of customer monitoring, right? The investments and so forth. So we are seeing increasing need, right, in terms of managing the digital risk very tightly. And we have seen how, in fact, within Singapore, right, the regulators are also heightening in terms of their the new guidelines and so forth. Yeah, so this is a huge piece. And I think for banks and FIs to move forward, the winning formula would really be in balancing how the business agenda move forward, coupled with priority on customer centricity and balancing with a very, very robust risk management framework. Yeah.
Okay. And MAS in the past year have revised its IT risk management guideline on for operational resilience, as well as third-party outsourcing. More recently, the Bank of England reiterate the concerns about third-party providers, service provider, especially around cloud and the concentration of cloud and so on and so forth. So all this new risk dimension that's coming into play. I know that we are almost running out of time. I'll just have a few final comments, maybe from Colin, Tobias, Graeme, and Matthew, maybe Colin. In terms of what we've discussed so far, how do you?
I find it very interesting, the discussion by all of the esteemed colleagues. I think it's, we're looking and we've traversed from customer centricity to risk management to the changes that we have to make within our product sets and how we're all responding. And I think the one thing that it tells everybody listening to this this discussion is that the diversity of challenges that the financial institutions have now has grown quite complex. And we've all got to, shall we say, manage all of those in relation to how we're going to be successful, not only within our marketplace, but how we're going to be successful with our customers. And so I think that's the interesting thing I'm taking out of this discussion.
Okay, great. Thank you, Colin. Yeah, in terms of the complexity of the different perspective from customer centricity to managing risk and compliance. And doing it dynamically, because there are so many development and changes that we are seeing as we go. Tobias,
Thank you. Actually, maybe as a closing comment, some more controversial thought. I think that's always more interesting. Actually, I don't think that the journey has changed. We are still on the same journey of digitalization where we were 3 years ago. The only thing is we are moving much faster now in the short term, and because of COVID. And that brings obviously then risks with it, because every time you move quickly into a new land means new opportunities, but also new risks that you never thought about. And basically our minds need to catch up with where we are today. And what that means for us is that we are moving towards this more integrated way, but our minds haven't really thought about the integration part so much. We always thought about like, how do we secure or design the individual parts? But now it's about putting everything together in a secure way. And that's a great opportunity for our industry as well, because it creates new products, new solutions for our customers.
Okay. We're kind of used to working a silo at a time, so to speak. Now it's bringing everything together. Matthew, your perspective.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. I mean, risk generally, inside these organizations was very much silo inside financial services, but now every area of the business obviously has different risks that they need to address. And having that common view of bringing all those risks together, those, the levels of where they are, the exposures into one system is obviously something that we're seeing frequently today. and then being able to show that to the different personas, so that, you know, the different levels of management, the different lines of defence can see what they actually have to see, and seeing it real time is what we're seeing and working with businesses every day. And, you know, the more and more that we can insert these, you know, controls and risks and so forth into workflows and digitalize them, the quicker that we can bring that data obviously to the right personas. So it's a very interesting time, but risk, as we know, is probably the major topic on everyone's agenda. But at the same time, that, you know, financial institutions need to grow, and that's all about the customer experience. So it's a balance.
Right. Thank you, Matthew. Yes, it's a balance, and that's the core business of banks, right? Managing the risk, and over time, you know, as we focus on customer journey and centricity, we shouldn't move too far away from this core responsibility as bankers and as banks to always put risk at the forefront. And how apt that we have Graeme to round up, from a risk perspective.
Yeah, no, I liked Tobias's comment about speed. I mean, I'm finding it, like, for example, the recent ransomware incidents that have been happening around the world. It just shows me that organizations, that people, they still struggle to understand theoretical risks that haven't happened yet at scale to themselves or to their peers. So, like, it's kind of like a human nature thing that we need to see a familiar horse kind of bolting from that stable, that barn, before we start fixing the security on the stable doors. And we're now seeing like this theoretical discussion about third-party risk is now actually being looked at really, really carefully, and the practitioners are seeing it and going, well, I've been saying that for a while. This is how we should be managing it. We should be managing the controls and risks at our third parties in the same way that we manage them for our own organizations. And, you know, and again, you know, what Matthew said, a common view of risks, being able to see across your organization, your partner organizations in real time, and then being able to show that to your senior leadership so that they've got that comfort, and having those controls built in and monitoring them, so that's just happening and you're not really thinking about it. So that's really my thoughts from here in the discussion, as well as all the various other avenues we went down. Yeah.
Well, would that be the nature of the risk that makes it harder to kind of look at from a centralized basis? This whole nature of operational risk, right? It's IT security risk, fraud risk, and so on and so forth, as opposed to the other risk type, credit risk, market risk, liquidity risk, where they are more quantifiable, right? I mean, operational risks take all forms, right? Fraud, or employee getting data access and passing it on, someone's carelessness causing some of this risk. It's less defined as a construct, operational risk. But something to think about, how to better centralize and have an enterprise view of all the operational risk that banks deal with as they move on to increase digitalization and confront new requirements, whether from regulators or from consumers, or even from ecosystem partners that they have not encountered before. So it's an ongoing challenge that we face as this whole pace of digitization will only increase as we proceed forward, and financial institutions really need to look at the opportunities, right, as they design their processes around the customers, to identify where the opportunities to put in the controls and to centralize that risk, so that they have kind of full view of it. As Tobias said, what we are facing is not new; it's just accelerated. So on that note, I'd like to thank all our esteemed guests for joining us today, and we hope that our audience have benefited from your insights and the sharing of your experiences. A recording of this session will be available on the Radio Finance website for download and playback. And please also register for all our exciting upcoming sessions. We wish all our guests a good day ahead, and we really appreciate your joining us and spending time with us today. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you, Boon Ping.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Have a
you.
good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
you.